Hello and welcome to Name on the Trophy, the Manchester United podcast and YouTube show hosted by me, Dominic Booth. We've got another one of our stats specials with returning guest star Alex Wylie from Sabr Sports, making his second appearance on the pod. Alex, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Dom. You'll notice I've now got a lovely mic, so I should be coming through very nicely as opposed to last time.
Sounding loud and clear today, and impressed enough on your debut that the manager's given you a second appearance. For context, Martin Dubravka has made 2 Manchester United appearances, so hopefully you build
and is
on
now
to
gone.
Exactly, and hopefully you build on those 2 that you've made and go on to reach the top 10 appearance makers like David De Gea at Manchester United.
Yeah.
Incidentally, that is exactly what we're talking about today. Goalkeepers.
A lovely segue.
A lovely segue. The David De Gea situation in particular, we'll be talking about, and potential options to replace him as United's number 1. Dean Henderson we'll talk about, and Jack Butland as well, who's, as we speak, on the verge of completing a loan to United till the end of the season to be the number 2 option. But we'll talk about him as well. But let's start off, Alex, with De Gea. This is an issue that I often run into on Twitter, and I run into an army of David De Gea defenders, people who defend David De Gea, not the people who play in front of him. And there are many of them because of his long service to the club. I mentioned then he's in the top 10 appearance makers at the club all time. He's obviously had his real highs at United, but we appear to be in a more of a fallow period for him. Is that fair to say?
A more fallow period. I'm not sure if it's a more fallow period. I think it's more of a case that he increasingly doesn't fit the style of football that United want to play, and specifically Ten Hag. It's obvious that Ten Hag wants to build out from the back. We saw that in the first few games until it all went pear-shaped against Brentford. And since then, he's pulled back. But it's very clear that, certainly from watching Ajax as well and Onana at Ajax, that he wants us to play out from the back, and I just don't think De Gea has the technical ability to do it, if I'm brutally honest.
Yeah, distribution is always a thing that people come to. Shot stopping isn't really a cause for debate with De Gea, although is his shot stopping good enough to make up for his sort of errors in distribution and errors coming out of his box to claim crosses and the like? I think that's a real area of concern for mine when it comes to De Gea.
Yeah. I mean, there's a point that can be made that in the past, De Gea was perhaps the best shot stopper in world football, and you could almost accept the other deficiencies that you spoke about because of that. I feel like his shot stopping isn't quite what it was. It's still, I would argue, very good. I mean, if you look at the Bournemouth game, the 2 long-range one-on-ones that he saved were very good saves, and he's still got that in his locker. But as I said before, distribution with De Gea is a problem. I would argue he's more or less average for a Premier League goalkeeper with his feet. And as you said, cross-handling, I wouldn't even argue he's average at cross-handling. I'd actually argue he's one of the poorer goalkeepers in the top 5 European leagues. So yeah, we're at a point now where his shot stopping can't make up for those deficiencies. It just can't.
There are those, though, that pointed to his performances last season for United when probably he was the best player, maybe bar Ronaldo, and his stats look good. And I think he won the Club's Player of the Year award again for about the 5th or 6th time in his career. And back in 17, 18, 19, he was winning that on a regular basis. And that wasn't that long ago. And people's mind, for a goalkeeper at De Gea's age, they say he's still a top goalkeeper. He's still got his best years ahead of him. What is the sort of the counter to that argument?
Well, has he got his best years ahead of him? Probably not. I mean, he's 32 now. Goalkeepers tend to age very slowly, as I'm sure most listeners are aware. But as I said before, the deficiencies in his game are too great to make up for the shot stopping. And to be honest, I know you mentioned the data beforehand, goalkeeping data is difficult to use at best. So a little bit of background about myself. So I've worked club side, I've worked for an agency. And I didn't mention this in the previous podcast, but whilst I was at the agency, we did a lot of consultancy work. And quite a lot of that consultancy work revolved around identifying goalkeepers through data. And quite quickly on, we realized that goalkeeping data in its current form is not good enough to scout goalkeepers. The main reason being, certainly with shot stopping, it's very small sample. You need to look over seasons upon seasons upon seasons. And secondly, with regards to shot stopping, distribution, cross handling, it's not detailed enough. It's just not detailed enough. So those that point to him having good data, I think need to take a step back if they're going to use that as an argument. And to be honest, throughout this entire podcast, I'm going to use about 3 or 4 different sources because one single data point is not reliable to use for goalkeepers. You need to take a really broad approach with it.
And that's the sort of the same, even outside of the analytics community, if you want to call it that. Even in general journalism, when reporting about goalkeepers, people talk about clean sheets. And De Gea has kept eight clean sheets in 17 league games this season. He's kept 138 clean sheets in nearly 400 league appearances for United. But I just don't think that really tells you anything. I think that tells you a lot about the defense, about the entire team. It doesn't. You could be a good goalkeeper in a bad side, right?
Exactly. Clean sheets might be the most useless data that you can use to assess a goalkeeper. The next best would be save percentage, but that doesn't take into consideration where the shots were hit from, where they were going to in the goal. So a goalkeeper that faces a lot of long-range shots, which tend to be goalkeepers at better teams, tend to have better save percentage. Ederson might be the best distributor in world football, but he's not a good shot stopper. And he's got fantastic clean sheet numbers because City don't concede a lot of goals because they've got the ball all the time. And teams just don't get anywhere near them. The next best, I guess, is something called post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed, which is
one for the purists. This one,
it's a terrible name for a girl band. It's an even worse name for a stat. Basically, what it does is it looks at where the shot was hit from, where it's going to in the goal, the height of it, the angle, etc. It works out the likelihood of that becoming a goal, and then you compare that versus the actual goals that the goalkeeper's conceded. The idea being that a good goalkeeper concedes less goals than you would expect him to concede. The issue with that, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, is it's not descriptive enough. So if we take a shot, 2 shots, both hit from 40 yards out, both are straight at the goalkeeper, they're literally identical. For one of those shots, the goalkeeper catches it cleanly. And for the other one, the goalkeeper spills it right into the middle of the penalty area. The post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed model, which is more or less the best that we've got that's out there, would treat them exactly the same. Because at the end of the day, as far as the model is concerned, he saved it. And that's a big problem. That's a really big problem. And that's why, as I said before, goalkeeping stats can be problematic at best.
Has this got anything to do with how United themselves rate De Gea then? And bring this up because I'm just going to drop in the contract situation that probably most people listening to this know about. United are keen to keep De Gea on what many understand is going to be a reduced terms contract.
Yeah.
Whether that actually plays out like that, we'll see. I think De Gea said that he wants to stay and that there are talks going on that he thinks are going to end in a good way, which is his quote. But United, a lot of people saying I'm among this crowd that say they need to be ruthless when it comes to De Gea. I just simply don't think that he's good enough anymore to be the number one goalkeeper for, like you said, a team that want to play this way. But United will have their own metrics when deciding whether to extend people's contracts and whether people are worth what they want to be worth in terms of wages and salary. And that's a really tricky one with De Gea, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure if United will be using data to make that point. It's more of a case. They should be using it in part, although data for goalkeepers can be problematic, as I said before. It should always be part of the picture alongside traditional scouting, background checks, all that. I think it's more of a case that of De Gea's sort of player of the seasons and things like that. He's at this point now where for United, he's been a fairly consistent performer across 10 years. His shot stopping, as I said before, in certain parts has been phenomenal. And goalkeepers, fans will remember that and will remember that fondly. And I think it's the same for the staff at United. I imagine a lot of them still hold him in very high regard. And it's kind of warped because back in the day, everyone used to speak about De Gea being the best goalkeeper in the world. And that I still hear that trotted out to this day. And he really isn't. And it's almost like there's some people that can see that, and there's others that just will not listen to anything else, no matter what kind of performance he puts in. And I imagine certain staff at United hold him in very high regard. I mean, Ten Hag has always been very positive about him, but I'm convinced that if you were to ask him privately, he would have quite big concerns about what he's like in terms of distribution, cutting out through balls and cutting out crosses.
We've been here before with all of what you just said then. He's held in high regard, past achievements. Ten Hag nice about him, but maybe wants to move him on. That sounds a lot like what we talked about last time in the Cristiano Ronaldo scenario. And I'm not saying that De Gea is the Cristiano Ronaldo, and he would definitely not kick up the same sort of fuss that Cristiano Ronaldo did, because he's an absolute model professional, and that's another reason why he is held in such high esteem at United. But United are going to be looking for a new goalkeeper soon. We know that Jack Butland is arriving on loan, and we don't understand that he will be anything other than a number 2, a replacement for Martin Dubravka, who's come and gone. But is there any scope whatsoever for Butland to, say, get some opportunities in the Cups, put down a marker, play some games, and then he becomes the number 2 goalkeeper for next year, and De Gea maybe isn't the number 1. They look for another number 1.
Maybe. I mean, Jack Butland is again a player whose profile and what people think about when they hear about Jack Butland, when he was younger, certainly, is completely mismatched to the player himself. So Jack Butland has barely played that much football. He's barely kicked a ball this season. I think he played 7 or 8 games last season. So for me, using data to assess him is difficult. I can say from previous work that I've done that Jack Butland has never really stood out at anything, if I'm brutally honest. He's maybe a slightly better cross handler than De Gea. I think he's a little bit more proactive in the air. His distribution, I'd argue, is actually worse. And his shot stopping, so that post-shot, I'm not going to say it all because it's such a long name, but I looked over 3 or 4 seasons of Jack Butland because that's what I had to do to get anything remotely reliable. So I looked at 3 or 4 seasons worth of data from the Premier League, 234 shots, and he conceded roughly 4 goals more than he would be expected to. So a slight underperformance for a Premier League goalkeeper. Like I said, there's not a lot to work off because he's just not played that much, which should sort of raise red flags for United bringing him in the first place. And the data that we do have and the footage that we do have also doesn't look that good. So I honestly do not get it. It seems very opportunistic. It's just a case of getting someone in. I think he's on a loan, isn't it? So there won't be a fee. I imagine the wages might still be quite hefty for a GK2. I really
United,
don't get it.
Of course, they'll be hefty. It's United. There's no one, not even Tom Heaton, the 3rd choice, or probably even Nathan Bishop, the 4th choice, will be on a nice, light, affordable pay package. I wouldn't have thought. But
no,
there's also the Dean Henderson question, Alex, with him out on loan at the moment, and a lot of people will believe that he's burnt his bridges after the comments that he made in the summer. I think, in a way, I had a lot of sympathy with Henderson with what he said in the summer. I think that he had that chance and deserved that chance to be United's number 1. Wasn't doing too badly when he got the opportunity in the COVID season, I think it was, under Solskjaer. And ironically, he then got COVID at the start of the next season, at the 21-22 campaign. De Gea performed really well, got United out of trouble a lot in a bad side. And Henderson spent the whole season on the bench and then went out on loan again and felt frustrated doing so. It seems like he's missed the bus, but is he even good enough to be driving that bus, if I can continue the analogy?
Yeah. Is he good enough to be driving the bus? No. In the same way, I don't think De Gea is good enough to be driving the bus.
I'm going to carry this on, are we?
just keep this going for the rest of the podcast. Look, Dean Henderson is a Premier League level goalkeeper. He's too good to be a GK2, I think. So there's this data on Twitter done by a guy called, I believe it's John Harrison, and he looks at goalkeeping data in a bit more of a nuanced way that a lot of the companies like Opta are doing. And he effectively breaks down every aspect of goalkeeping. So shot stopping, distribution, cross handling, one-on-ones, penalty saving, all of that. And he effectively models the effect it has on the expected goals for or against. So for De Gea, for example, this season has a -2 expected goals for cutting out crosses. And that's because he allows a lot of crosses in quite dangerous areas that he doesn't come out and cut. So Dean Henderson right now, if you take everything into consideration, has a -1.1 expected goals overall, which places him 13th for Premier League goalkeepers. De Gea is currently 17th, so he's actually lower than that. This data is from November because I can only take it from when it was last posted on Twitter, which was November, but De Gea at the time was 17th. So Dean Henderson is a Premier League level goalkeeper. I think he's more comfortable in possession. So this season, he has 41 touches of the ball per 90 minutes. It's a very basic stat, but it gives us some sort of idea of how involved he is. That puts him in the 81st percentile for top 5 European goalkeepers. So very good. De Gea, by contrast, is 25th percentile, only takes 32 touches. And the season before that was in the 2nd percentile in the top 5 European leagues, which more or less puts him rock bottom of every GK1 in those leagues. So you're getting an idea that I think Dean Henderson would be a better fit for United. He'd be a better fit for Ten Hag. I don't think he's good enough to be driving the bus, but yeah, I think it's one of that.
I don't either think that Henderson is good enough. But this is the thing that is often thrown at you when you say De Gea isn't good enough. People automatically think you want Henderson as the replacement, and I do think Henderson probably deserves another chance at it. I will say that maybe he isn't good enough, and maybe United should be looking higher and aiming bigger with the goalkeeper choice in the summer, which I think we're going to come on to. But
yeah,
I don't think the problem is that Henderson is such a different profile of goalkeeper to De Gea, as you've said, that whether that will upset United's balance in defence, a lot of those players have become used to playing with De Gea. Henderson's a lot more aggressive, a lot more involved, like you say, and De Gea's far more passive. The irony of it, though, is, and you mentioned Ten Hag would probably prefer Henderson. Ten Hag tried to sign Henderson on loan in about 12 months from now, actually, January 2022. Ajax tried to sign Henderson on loan. So that's Ten Hag, a fan of that style of goalkeeper, as we know. So yeah, it's a really tricky one, but De Gea has the shirt, and if he gets a new contract, even on reduced terms, Henderson is not going to like it.
Yeah, and I can't help but feel that Henderson has burnt the bridge.
Yeah.
So it almost makes this discussion redundant. The comments he made are difficult to come back from.
Not about Ten Hag, though. That's the thing. I wonder
Not
whether
about Ten Hag
offers a new slate.
Yeah, but I feel the fan base will remember that. Although we quite quickly forgot how that De Gea wanted to go to Real Madrid, so maybe scratch that. I don't know what I'm talking about.
He was the world-class goalkeeper that we mentioned at that point, though. Undoubtedly was the world-class goalkeeper at that stage. So what about these replacements then? Let's get into the real juicy bit of this podcast. I believe I know you've got 3 names lined up for us. Two of which I'm very familiar with and have mentioned in the past in terms of goalkeeper options. One I can't even pronounce. So which one do you want to start with?
What can I? So I'll go number 3, number 2, number 1, because that'll keep people listening to the podcast.
That's a very stats way of doing it as well.
Yeah, it's very clever. So number 3 is David Raya at Brentford. On our Sabr Sports app, which uses Scout data to predict the effect a player's data would have on team goal difference, he gets an 80, which is pretty favourable. De Gea gets an 81, just for full clarity. On John Harrison's data that I mentioned before, David Raya is actually 5th in the Premier League, which is really good. I think Alisson is number 1. David Raya is 5th. And most importantly, David Raya is more comfortable getting on the ball. It really comes down to it. All 3 goalkeepers that I have on this list are goalkeepers that are willing to get on the ball, willing to play through presses, and also willing to come off their line to cut out crosses and through balls. So again, David Raya does that. He's happy to go long or short. And look, David Raya got in the Spain team for the World Cup. There's a lot of pundits who still call David De Gea world class. He wasn't even in the top 3 for Spain. David Raya was. And I imagine people will be saying, oh, Brentford's a massive step up to United. Perhaps, but he's got quite a lot of Premier League experience at this point. He's still fairly young. I mean, 27. He's got a fair way to go. Yeah, it's a good age for a goalkeeper. You should get at least 5 or so years out of that, bar any horrible injuries. So yeah, number 3, David Raya. What do you think about that?
Well, he's my fantasy Premier League goalkeeper, and I'm on the rise up our table at the moment. So if that says anything,
on the rise from bottom place.
Top half now. That's fine. No, I think Raya's a really good option. I think, like you say, really good with his feet. It just seems like a really intelligent goalkeeper. I don't even know if there is a metric to measure that, but just the way he sort of comes out, commands his line. United have been crying out for a goalkeeper, basically, I think, in the mould of Alisson or Edison in the past few years. That's what everyone wants United to have. And I think Raya is close to that in terms of coming off his line, good on the ball, and plays for a team who play that way. I know it's Brentford, and like you say, I think maybe a Brentford United step up isn't so great when it's a goalkeeper, because at Brentford, you're probably going to face more shots than United anyway, right? So
yeah,
it sort of works that you could make that jump. So Raya gets a tick from me. I'd have him higher than my number 3 out of these 3 options, put it that way. For full clarity as well for the listeners, I remember that Brentford game when United lost 4-0 and De Gea had an absolute shocker, made 2 huge errors, and Raya was very, very comfortable in the other goal. Alex and I were actually on his stag do in Newcastle watching that incredibly frustratedly in a bar. So that was that lives long in my memory.
Really enjoyable. Yeah. Dressed as Where's Wally characters.
Yeah. No, the pictures will not be shared on my public Twitter, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Number 2.
So number 2 is another Premier League goalkeeper, another Spanish Premier League goalkeeper, another goalkeeper that is fairly comfortable in possession, really proactive in the air, and that's Robert Sanchez at Brighton. So his Sabr score is 82, which puts him higher than David De Gea. He's actually only 16th on John Harrison's ratings, although admittedly this was in November, so can change quite quickly. He's tall, as I said before, active in the air. My one concern would be his shot stopping. I think historically his shot stopping has been slightly below average, but you could argue that's the same case for Edison. And as we said before, a club as good as United should have a goalkeeper who shouldn't face that many shots, in theory. Having Edison in net has never held City back. So, yeah, my number 2 is Robert Sanchez.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case, Sanchez. I remember him coming completely out of the blue a few years ago in the Brighton side. I think they had Matty Ryan in goal, who I think a lot of people were fairly impressed by. Sanchez was a number 2. I think he went out on loan to the league somewhere. Rochdale.
Went to Rochdale, yeah.
Yeah, and did very well by all accounts. and then has now become one of the sort of most revered goalkeepers in the league. 25 years old in the Spain squad, has sort of had a meteoric rise in the last couple of years, and he seems quite hot property at the moment. He seems to be mentioned whenever a top team getting a new goalkeeper is talked about in the press. Robert Sanchez's name seems to come up.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I think with good reason. Like I said before, his shot stopping can be a bit of an issue. He is very proactive in the air, and I can say that from data that we used to collect, and this is all public. I think it's on social media. Effectively, what we did is we looked at every single cross that a goalkeeper faced, every single one, not just the ones they came for, and we looked at where the cross was hit from, where it was going to in the penalty area, the trajectory of it, the amount of players that a goalkeeper would need to go through in order to get to the ball, all that information. From that could work out the likelihood that a goalkeeper in the Premier League would come for that given cross. And then we can compare that to how many times they did try to action the cross. And actioning a cross can include not touching the ball. I mean, anyone who's ever watched a game and seen a goalkeeper rush into no man's land can tell you that it's significant when that happens, even if they don't touch the ball. So that is all the information that we looked at to try and garner how proactive goalkeepers are in the air. And Robert Sanchez is one of, if not the most proactive goalkeepers in the Premier League. Probably
Very
alongside
tall, isn't he?
Very tall, which again, height doesn't have a huge correlation with proactiveness. I mean, Edison, for example, not the tallest goalkeeper, pretty proactive in the air. David De Gea is quite tall. Joe Hart, back in the day, a very tall goalkeeper who didn't really come for crosses either. So that's a bit of a sort of misnomer, the right word. It's
Fabian
people
Barthez
think
would be the extreme example because he was a very small goalkeeper who I remember being extremely active off his line. So
yeah, I mean, if you're a smaller goalkeeper, you tend to be quicker off the ground, which can be a benefit for crosses. So yeah, height doesn't actually have a huge input on that. But in the case of Nick Pope and Robert Sanchez, these are two very tall goalkeepers who are also very proactive.
Okay, let's get to number 3 on your list, and then we can make an informed decision and tell United what they should be doing in the summer.
Okay, so number 3, I might need a moment to pronounce this correctly. It's Georgi Mamardashvili at Valencia, who some of you might have heard of. He's also a very, very tall goalkeeper. Previously, I mean, we're talking about, I want to say about a year ago, maybe slightly over a year, was playing in the Georgian league for Dynamo Tbilisi, signed for Valencia to, I think, play for their youth team because he's pretty young. He's 22 now. Had very good performances for the first team and is now the undisputed number 1 for Valencia at 22 years old. And when you watch him, you can see why. So he has a Sabr score of 83, which is the best of the players on the list. As I said before, very tall, happy to sweep up, and perhaps most importantly, really calm under pressure, happy to receive the ball, happy to play through. I think in 2 or 3 years, he'll be a name on everyone's lips, although no one will be able to pronounce it. But
maybe not
I think
everyone's
he will be one of the top goalkeepers in a few years' time. And if United are ahead of the curve, they could actually bring him in just as De Gea is on his way out. That's what I would like them to do.
Well, United were ahead of the curve 11, 12 years ago when signing a goalkeeper from the Spanish league in David De Gea. So, you never know. Is it just the case with Mamardashvili? Am I saying that right?
I think so.
Mamardashvili, that he's just got the highest ceiling out of these goalkeepers. And actually looking around world football at the moment, a lot of the goalkeepers who the stellar names are the ones maybe in the second half of their career, autumn of their career. And United have got to be really hot on this if they want to get a goalkeeper who is going to be, 10 years potentially in their goal.
Yeah. As I said at the start of the podcast, goalkeepers age slower than any other position. We've seen goalkeepers, Buffon's an obvious example, who can play into their late 30s, early 40s. So it's not a surprise that a lot of the top goalkeepers now are in their 30s or approaching their 30s. To be this good at 22 is pretty outstanding. And I think something that a top club will take seriously pretty soon. The one caveat I do have to Mamardashvili is he has quite a long contract, I think, 2027. But I don't think Valencia are swimming in money. I'm sure a listener will correct me on that, but I don't think they're swimming in money. So could be quite happy to cash in if a big offer comes through.
Yeah, we know money's not really been a barricade for United in the past when making these deals. So he's your number one out of these three, though, Alex, would you say?
Yeah, a combination of what he's done so far and the fact that he's only 22 makes it really interesting. There won't be any sort of Premier League tax in terms of how much you have to pay either. Although as soon as United come to the table, there's a United tax anyway. But for all those reasons, yeah, he is my number one. But I will say Robert Sanchez, David Raya, I'd be pretty happy with those as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just from a transfer point of view, you don't actually see United linked with a huge number of goalkeepers in the press. Not in the same way that this month, recording in January, we're seeing so many striker names. We mentioned 6 names on the last podcast we did. I know 2 of them have now gone to other clubs. That was really great for us. But even since then, there's probably been 10, 12 names floating around. But you don't see that with goalkeepers, which is strange considering David De Gea, as it currently stands at the time of speaking, his contract is literally going to run out at the end of the season. He will get an extension of some sort, we understand, but why? I just don't know why that is. Jan Oblak was always the perennial one that was linked. United were very interested at times when De Gea might have been going into one of those little dips, but he always pulls himself back. Maybe that is the reason.
Yeah, I think goalkeepers in general are quite overlooked. I'm not sure if United signing a goalkeeper sells as many papers as United signing a striker.
No,
even
it
club
doesn't.
side,
I can tell you it definitely doesn't.
Yeah, so and I can say that club side on the recruitment side, quite often the recruitment department will literally just leave goalkeepers alone and just give it to the goalkeeping coach. Probably not the case at bigger clubs like United, but at plenty of clubs that I've spoken to before, it's often the goalkeeping coach that almost does it entirely on his own, as well as like having to coach. So yeah, I don't know what it is with goalkeepers. I think it's partly because it's so different to any other position on the field. They do tend to get overlooked, and I think that's probably why. And also the fact that David De Gea, by many, is considered like good for United. Not by us, but by many and by many fans. I think most people would think, yeah, could get him on a reduced contract, get him on reduced wages, and that would be good for us. I just don't think that's the case.
Yeah, we apologise to all De Gea apologists that we have been very negative about him, but that these are just the facts as we see them. So it does remain that Erik ten Hag has a huge decision with his goalkeepers at Manchester United, probably in the summer, unless we see 6 months of absolute heroics from Jack Butland, which we both believe is fairly unlikely. Alex, that's pretty much all we've got time for today. But thank you very much for your unique insight after counting so many crosses in the past. Your unique insight on goalkeepers.
That's a slight dig because I think I've looked at thousands of crosses back to back to back, most of which the goalkeeper does not come for, by the way. I think goalkeepers come for like 15% of crosses. So you're talking like 85% of crosses that don't even get touched by the goalkeeper. I've sat, watched, and recorded data for. So yeah,
that was a regular dig from me to you, but it's been proven very, very worthwhile on this occasion. So
useful for this podcast, really useful for this podcast.
Exactly, thank you. And we'll be back with more of these stats special episodes with Alex Wylie from Sabr Sports. Pop him a follow on Twitter, and I believe he's on Instagram as well these days. Sabr Sports, Sabr_Sports,
Sabr_Sports, and we're on TikTok as well. On TikTok
for all the kids out there. So that's great. Then thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Alex, for appearing. You can subscribe to Name on the Trophy on YouTube or on wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back after United next game to review all that happened and with more of these special episodes. Cheers.